3, 2, 1.
Here we go!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Texas Private School Podcast. As always, I am one-third of your hosting crew, Wes Tolleson, joining you from College Station, Texas. Walker Lott also is calling in from College Station, Texas. And for, I think, the third time officially, our only recurring guest on the show, which shows how much we like him, Brandon Brunson of TexasHighSchoolBaseball.com. Brandon, I see the little Texas Private School Podcast sticker. I just noticed that in your background. That is fantastic. That is why this is your third time on the show, because you are a big supporter. We appreciate it. How have you been? How's Texas private school baseball been?
It's good, man. It was really good hanging out with you guys at the basketball game back not too long ago in the winter.
Yeah, February, something like that, maybe?
February, yeah. Midland Christian had a pretty good run there. Called basketball. I really enjoyed that a whole lot more than I thought I would, by the way.
Really?
The basketball, that is.
Right.
Baseball is crazy, man. It's we're right at the cusp of playoffs. Divisions 4 and 5 are getting started, have some by-district games under their belt, big games going on. Supposed to have a massive one tonight, Southwest Christian and Liberty, and they got rained out, so it's pushed to tomorrow. So I can't fill out that part of my bracket. But it's been good, just trying to keep up with everything.
Absolutely. Yeah. We were saying before we started recording, it's been a very, very busy time, and it's not really a time that you can kick back and relax. You've got a lot that you have to process through and get going. So we do appreciate you taking the time to come on and explain. I'm jealous that Walker, back in February, whenever we went to Midland Christian, I'm jealous Walker got to spend an extended period of time doing the broadcast with you. That is like one of my dreams, to like be a color commentator or a play-by-play guy, and I'm extremely jealous of the opportunity Walker had. Walker, real quick, haven't heard from you yet. Your thoughts on private school landscape in general and how you've been doing.
Yeah, it's been a crazy time for us. We're staying busy, but not posting busy. A lot of stuff behind the scenes busy that we're excited to show you more later. But private school has been great. I've been trying to keep up with baseball as much as I can, but that's why we have Brandon here to keep us really updated on everything. But I mean, playoffs are always an exciting time for no matter what sport, and we're excited to kind of see what the next kind of couple weeks hold for some of these guys, some of these teams.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to get into now with all the formalities out of the way. So, Brandon, I will ask you, I want to know who has impressed you up to this point in the season. I have your power rankings here. Your large school top 20 consists of usual suspects like Prestonwood, Concordia, Houston Christian. Small school, we've got Colleyville Covenant, Temple Christian, Northland Christian. I just want to know who has really stood out to you and who has impressed you up to this point into the season.
And it's the usual suspects at the top. So Prestonwood and Concordia, it just feels like they're on that collision course to meet at UT Arlington here in a few weeks. They're just loaded, both of them. Coach Valet told me he thinks this might be the best Prestonwood team in school history. Wow. And that's saying something. Concordia have had some young kids rise up and do really well. So they've been the ones. It's kind of hard for me. I don't know about you guys. The SPC is always a little bit of a mystery. Episcopal and Kincaid still sit at the top of that 4A. Houston is still the best baseball in SPC. And they play such a tough schedule. So like you look at my rankings, and Kincaid is up there pretty high with a 21-20 record, but they play such a loaded schedule that they've deserved their ranking, right? I don't just look at what their record is. I dig into who have they played and what difference has that made, which is why when you talk about surprises, there's been one on the other side, and that's Second Baptist, who they had a rough start. We're missing some pieces, and the record just was not good. And I kept them in, even with a losing record, as long as I could, dropping them down a bit. But I knew when they got their pieces back at the end of the year, they would be good. They have good players. And when it got to district, they got some pieces back. They didn't win the district, but they did make the playoffs. And when you talk about a dark horse, that's a dangerous kind of team sitting down there in a bracket, because they've been there won it last year and have a lot of those pieces back. So they're experienced. And then on the small school, Colleyville Covenant has just torn through the season in that small school division. They've been really, really good. But so has Temple Christian. I get a kid named Tanner Wiggins, 100 strikeouts, going to Weatherford College next year. I expect that he'll carry them through to UT Arlington. So it feels like it's been kind of top heavy this year, and then the middle and the bottom has been really difficult to pinpoint.
Yeah, that seems to follow a similar narrative that football does a lot of the time. Like, obviously, you're going to have teams that'll surprise you, like Antonian did for us this year. But a lot of the time, it's going to be your parishes. It's going to be your Shiner St. Paul's. It's going to be your Preston Woods, your Dallas Christians that are going to make up that top half. So that's interesting that follows a similar script as football. I wanted to ask about Ty Baker, obviously the pitcher for Second Baptist, the A&M signee. Maybe it's a little bit of bias on my part and Walker's part because he's committed to where we go to college. But how has he performed? And do you think that he will be somebody to watch if he is healthy right now? Is he somebody to watch in playoffs that can help propel Second Baptist to a dark horse type run?
So I think in the playoffs, yes, he will be. I haven't seen much out of him during the season. I think he was one of those pieces that was injured early on and didn't get a lot of repetition early in the season. But he's the kind of kid that he can step in and be just fine. So I think he can. You got a dangerous combination there with him and Luke Pettit. So you talk about a 1-2 punch from that school. So yes, I'm sure A&M is plenty happy to be getting Ty Baker.
Absolutely. Wait, what was that?
It's that tech in him,
Was that the? Oh, I don't like that at all, really. I like this one a little better. But granted, I started following A&M football after the Tech A&M rivalry dissipated, so I'll let that one slide. Okay, so we mentioned one potential dark horse in Second Baptist in the large school. I wanted to ask, is there anyone else that comes to mind when you say dark horse? You mentioned that it's been top heavy so far this season, but surely there are a couple other teams at least that you think could potentially, not necessarily win it all, but at least make some noise that aren't expected to.
Sure. This may still qualify as the top heavy piece, but they're not names that you hear year in and year out necessarily. Bishop Lynch has had a really nice year. TCA is another one that I think people probably overlook a little bit. When I talk to coaches about TCA, they like TCA a lot. Mm-hmm. So I think they're one that could trip somebody up on their side of the bracket. And it's going to be interesting, what happened with Division I. You guys know it from football. It was really kind of decimated. There's not a whole lot of schools left in Division I. So when you get to the bracket, you split District 1 and 2 evenly on both sides. So you're not going to have Dallas versus Houston necessarily. It may end up Dallas or Houston. Right. You just don't know. So that's going to be interesting to watch in Division I for sure. Division II, so this is going to sound like a homer here, and I'll have it later in another segment you're going to ask about too, but Midland Christian has had a really nice year. And when I look at the bracket, the way it sets up, they would probably be considered a dark horse after all they went through last year with the suspension of the season, got into the playoffs, knocked out by Bishop Lynch at home, by the way. It was here in Midland on a 1-0 kind of game. So that's another one. Now, second round, they'll run into Grapevine Faith, who's sitting there at 25-2 with a nice 1-2 punch as far as the arms go, Romolo and Saint Romain. So that's a fantastic round 2 matchup. Assuming they both go. Now, Faith has to play Savio, and Coach Vaughn has told me that's a much improved team, and they won that district. So check that. They came in second in that district, but Coach Vaughn has seen them, and he likes them. He thinks they're pretty good. So they would qualify for sure as a dark horse.
Very interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. I'll make sure to keep my eye on that Faith Savio game because without you mentioning that, just seeing that matchup, I would have just penciled Faith in and not even thought about it. But hopefully that proves more interesting than advertised. Walker.
I was gonna ask on the other side of that D2 bracket, Lutheran South is always one of those premier programs down in Houston. Is that someone you kind of? We'll talk more, I guess, about playoffs in a bit, but like, is that kind of the team that like some of these northern teams are gonna have to be like kind of looking towards and be like, hey, that might be a team that we're gonna have to face down the line?
I think so. That's the one that I would have in the lower part of that bracket. I've got Lutheran South making it to Arlington.
Yeah.
Coach Snyder just won game number 250 last week, so he hit a milestone. It's awesome. He does a great job. Has won 4 state championships. Knows what he's doing. He's got some really good young talent, and they're going to be a problem in that bottom half of the bracket. It's that side of the bracket, Walker, is littered with District 5. It's Second Baptist, it's Kelly Catholic, it's Woodlands Christian, and watch out for Kelly. They've had a really nice year. So Kelly Catholic on the top side of that bracket. I could very well see a scenario. Those two finished 1-2 in that district. I could very well see a scenario where they play each other in the semifinals.
Wow. Well, shout out the Golden Triangle down there in Beaumont.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll be very interesting. So I want to segue into this. So I mentioned that every year we do our podcast awards show. So I want to do a mini version of that. I know I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, and maybe some people might take offense to not being called, but just off the top of your head, if you had to give out awards similar to what we do for the podcast, who would be some of your nominees for first, let's say, Coach of the Year?
Coach of the Year. That's a great one. So this is where I lean back to that. I said I had a bit of a homer pick. So and I didn't even consider that until you mentioned it before we got started. But with all that went on at Midland Christian last year, it was such a mess and changed coaches and everything was rough. They hired a new guy. His name is Bobby Mesker, came from Sul Ross State. He'd been the head coach at Sul Ross State for 15 years, moved up here to Midland. And not only do you move from college to high school, you move into the private school ranks, which is a totally different animal even from anything else. And he has done a really nice job. So I certainly would have him as a finalist for a Coach of the Year. I think you've got to look at a guy like Aaron Schneider at Second Baptist with that milestone victory. He's done a good job. Yeah, boy, that puts me on the spot. I tell you there's another first-year coach out here in West Texas at Lubbock Christian, a guy named Jordan Terry, who's stepped in, and he's guided them into the playoffs. And if you look at their part of the bracket, it sits up pretty nicely for them.
So I was going to ask real quick. It's funny you said that because I was going to mention Lubbock Christian plays Bishop Gorman round 1, and I'm just curious because obviously Gorman is in Tyler, where I grew up. Do you think that Lubbock Christian handles that game, or do you think it's going to be there's any debate for it?
So it's a 2-3 matchup. I would say there's always debate. I think Lubbock Christian will probably take care of business there.
That's fair. I will be personally pulling for Bishop Gorman, which I have never actually said in my life due to all the rivalries, but I have to rep the 903.
Sure you do.
Exactly. Okay, so we hit on Coach of the Year. So I want to talk about some people that can really throw the ball in terms of outstanding pitchers that you've noticed throughout private school this year. If you had to nominate some guys for Pitcher of the Year, who do you think would make that list?
Yeah, so Xavier Mitchell out of Prestonwood would make that list. He's a sophomore. He's on top of the strikeout list. He's done a really nice job. He's one of those kids that almost every week he could be nominated or win our Pitcher of the Week. He did win it once. Jackson Burns at Southwest Christian would be another one. Texas Tech commit. So he's had a nice year. As I mentioned earlier, Tanner Wiggins out of Temple Christian. And then there's another one down in the Houston area, Kason Evans at St. Pius X. He's headed to LSU. He's just a junior, but he's had a really nice year as well. A couple of no-hitters. So
Wow.
those guys would be on the list for pitcher of the year for sure.
That is very interesting. Yeah, there seems to always be a plethora of pitching talent in private schools, as denoted by the amount that go and play Division I baseball every year. So that's interesting to hear who's really at the top of that list this season. And finally, to round it out, I'd say, who do you think are I debated between going batter or hitter of the year. I grew up playing baseball. I can't believe I can't find the right terminology that rolls off the tongue. But anyway, in terms of batter of the year, who has impressed you most at the plate?
Man, that's the toughest one you could ask me. So we name, as you know, we name a hitter of the week. And I have not had a repeat hitter of the week winner this year, which usually I do. I don't track. The only thing I track during the year is home runs. Don't track the batting average or any of that. So that one's a little bit harder for me to answer. I will say this: when I look at the top of the home run list, it's Wesley Bryant out of Ovilla Christian, and then it's D. Kennedy out of Prestonwood, headed to University of Texas, and then Jax Marshall from McKinney, and Andy Neal from Grapevine Faith, and a young man named Talon Myers out of Round Rock Christian. So that's the top 5 home run hitters. So
Very interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, it seems like, obviously, like, I'll reiterate, there's obviously talent in private school. Like, we bang home every single week. We do it in football, if we're doing it basketball, if we're doing it baseball. If you haven't realized yet, it's kind of the whole point why we're doing this. There's a ton of talent in private school. All those guys just listed, go and look them up on your own if you're not aware. I mean, obviously all of them are extremely talented.
Yeah.
So moving on into actually our last official segment, it's a little more abstract, so you can choose where to go with it. But I just want your general playoff outlook. I want to know what you think, if there's anything, if it's division specific, if it's in terms of private school overall. I just want to know what your storylines are for the playoffs and who you think might have the best chance in terms of each division to go all the way.
Yeah, and this is an interesting year to do that because of the change. There was so much movement between divisions 1 and 5. Division 5 grew by a great number of schools. They had I had several new schools playing baseball this year, a lot of them in Division 5. Some of the Division 5s kicked up to 4. So the storyline going into last year, you had in Division 5, you had Weatherford Christian, who had won 2 state championships, would have won the COVID year. So they ended up winning last year. They move up to Division 4 and lose their coach. He retired. So they've struggled in Division 4. So you're going to have a new champion in Division 5. You're going to have a new champion in Division 4 because Midland Classical had won 2 in a row. They got bumped up to Division 3. And then in Division 3, they didn't even make the playoffs this year. So there's a lot. There's some new faces that you're going to see, in addition to the Lutheran South and the Prestonwood. So again, I think in Division 1, the storyline is just what I said earlier. I think it's going to be the clash of the Titans, Prestonwood and Concordia, on that very last day. Division 2, and I think Lutheran South getting back to the top of the mountain is probably the story to watch. But Kelly Catholic is certainly has had a good year. They split with Lutheran South, so that's a great storyline to watch. To see how far Midland can go on the heels of kind of a rough season. Can Colleyville Covenant finish off the run in Division 3? They haven't been to the state tournament as much as like a Lubbock Trinity. So Lubbock Trinity has been to the last 2 state tournaments. They've struggled a little bit this year, but typically Justin Phillips has those guys playing the way they need to play at playoff time. So that would, I don't know, would that qualify as a dark horse? They've been to the last 2 state tournaments. I don't know. And then Geneva. So here's another one, Geneva School. I keep getting questions about that out of District 5. So Division 3 District 5 is Bay Area and Cypress Christian. And they keep asking me, what about Geneva? What about Geneva? What do you know? I don't know too much about Geneva. They've got a great record, and they got the George brothers, who are really good players. So that probably qualifies as a dark horse in Division 3. Division 4, I think Temple Christian is probably the heavy favorite. They go into the playoffs 25-1. with Tanner Wiggins. If they play one game playoffs, they're probably gonna get to that final game and see Northland Christian or Pasadena First Baptist. And this would make people in Pasadena mad, but I would take Northland over Pasadena to get to that final game. Division 5, man, that one's going to be interesting. Wide open. Probably comes down to Sacred Heart and Shiner St. Paul.
Bitter rivals always.
I was going to say that I saw Shiner beat Baytown 15-0 in game 1. I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on how far Shiner could advance in D5.
Shiner can get to the final game. On the other side of the bracket, I think Ovilla Christian, they're the heavy favorite on that other side of the bracket. They've been highly ranked all year. The kid we mentioned, Wesley Bryant, at the top of the home run list. So I think that's where I'm looking in Division 5. It's interesting, that 15-0 game that you mentioned, Wes. There's always those games, and I love TAPS. I do. I appreciate it, but there's always those games that just shouldn't have been played.
Yeah.
I remember last year there was a coach. I heard this story secondhand, and they were trying to arrange their playoff game, and this one coach said, "I don't know why we're even arranging this game. We shouldn't even be in the playoffs. Like, we shouldn't have qualified. But we'll, bracket says we're here, so we'll go play you." And it was one of those kind of games. So, and I know TAPS has a tough job filling out that bracket. It's, I do not envy their job, but it does create for some interesting stuff in rounds 1 and even round 2.
Yeah.
You know what that reminds me of, that coach saying that, "I don't even know why we're here, but I guess we'll play since we are." It reminds me of playing Dion's Trinity Christian Cedar Hill throughout high school. So I've got Dion on the brain with recent events, which is very interesting to watch from my perspective.
You got that last district playoff slot, and you had to face them round 1. It was always the worst thing. But
we didn't make playoffs senior year because of them. So
we caught those guys at Jim Ned's school. They ended our season. The first string running back went out. The second string guy came in, and he was better than the first one. I was like,
wait. Now I'm curious. We're talking my language. So was this the 2017 season?
This would have been, I think that's right.
No, I guarantee you the second string was not, because I know Maurice Washington, and that is the freakiest athlete I've ever played against. I've said it a million times on this show. He hurdled me I was standing straight up, and he hurdled over my left shoulder.
Yeah, but he was the starter, right?
He was the starter in 2017. The backup was a man by the name of Quaylen Jones, who now plays at Baylor.
That's the one. So Washington got hurt in the game we played him, and the second guy came in. And that was exaggerated. That
he
night
might have been that game.
The first one. He was incredible. Like, there was no shot.
There's nothing I love more than just talking about old TAPS football memories. It brings me great joy. But good. I mean, is there anything else you wanted to hit on in terms of playoffs? Seems like we took a pretty comprehensive overview of what the paths are.
Yeah, I think so. I think that pretty well covered what I think is going to happen. Now, I don't know what's going to happen, as you guys are well aware.
Right.
I got a questionnaire back. I may have told you a story from a coach in Division 1 a couple of years ago. District 1, Division 2. It was the group All Saints and Midland and Liberty and Fort Worth Christian. And I always ask him to rank the teams at a preseason rank. And he sent it back and he said, "Your guess is as good as mine." And I was like, "That's perfect." Like, because that's what we're doing.
Right.
We're guessing at that. So like tomorrow night, Liberty Christian plays Southwest Christian. The winner goes to the playoffs and the loser goes to graduation. And both of those teams, in my opinion, ought to be in the playoffs. In fact, I think you could take everybody in District 1, that includes All Saints, put them in the bracket, and depending on where they are in the bracket, every one of those teams could win a game.
Right.
Because District 2 in that division outside of Grapevine Faith is just not strong. And then Districts 3 and 4 are just not that strong. So if you dropped Liberty or Southwest into District 2, 3, or 4, well, maybe not 2 this year, 3 or 4, they probably go undefeated and get in the bracket. All Saints would qualify for the playoffs out of one of those other districts.
Yeah, same thing as football this past year. Some guys just didn't make it or were lower seeds, and they make a couple games, and you saw like Fort Worth Christian, who barely made a playoff spot, work all the way to the semis last year. So that whole district is just tough sports wise. Like that's so tough.
Well, and Fort Worth Christian was out of it. Like the baseball race, they were out of it.
Yeah.
Then they beat Southwest Christian twice, and they climb right back into it. So Fort Worth Christian is in the playoffs. They're not having to play this game and put their fate in the hands of one game. Now that game, by the way, tomorrow night, since it got rained out tonight, talk about a matchup. So Southwest Christian's got Jackson Burns, the Texas Tech commit, and he's going to be pitching against Liberty and Hogan Nelson.
Yeah.
So I told Billy, I was like, man, I would love to be at that game.
That's fantastic. That will be a very interesting matchup to see tomorrow. Taking into account that that another tornado doesn't roll through tomorrow, because as the weather we've been having here in North Texas, that's not a guarantee. So, but that being said,
no rainouts in Midland.
Exactly. Maybe we should move all the currently scheduled games to Midland and just play it that way. I don't really see a fault.
That's what I tell them all the time. Like, if you want to avoid a rainout, I got you covered here. So.
Absolutely. We'll combine our findings and submit that to the TAPS board. But
yeah. You get laughed out of the room all three of us.
Anyways, Walker, with that discussion about the weather forecast, I have pretty much exhausted everything that I want to discuss regarding private school baseball. Is there anything you want to hit on before we get out of here?
No, man. I mean, I think you hit it all, and I think we've talked about everything. Just always thankful for you, man. I know we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and we're finally doing it now, but always a pleasure seeing you, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And by the way, Wes, you will, I am sure you guys both will get another invitation to Midland. So next year at the basketball game, Walker can do all the social media. You come up to the booth and we'll call part of the game. It's only fair, right?
It is only fair.
I think we do have to trade out. That, again, like I said, I've mentioned it to Walker and several people. It is my dream to do a whole game of just color commentary. I think, I don't know. It's just something I've thought about since I was a little kid. So you notice how excited and fast I'm talking about it. So
I think we can make it happen.
Hey, we might be up for like a football game or something like that. We'll see.
Yeah, we tried to pester everyone at Midland when we were there, like, have us out for a football game. We want to come out and see a football game. So maybe you can push that up the chain of command for us.
Yeah.
There will be some good ones this fall. So we'd love to have you guys both, football and basketball. I say I don't really work at the school. I'm kind of a quasi employee, but I think I could get Coach Langford to make some concessions.
I think so. You have closer connections to the program than we do. So,
Yeah.
But that being said, we are incredibly grateful for you taking time out of your very busy schedule to come and talk to us. And at the end of the day, do what our purpose is and promote private school athletes. We love doing it. You love doing it. It's only natural that we have you on to explain your field of expertise. But with all that being said, that will conclude our content for today. As always, I have been 1/3 of your hosting crew, Wes Tolleson. Walker Lott and Brandon Brunson have excellently been themselves. Brandon, thank you yet again for coming on and sharing your knowledge with us. I think it would only be appropriate that we try to do a state recap either before the state championship games or after, just talking about it, just trying to maybe get that ball rolling now. But that being said, thank you everyone for watching. We will see you in the next episode. See you later.
3, 2, 1.